Everybody. This is Dr. Dustin Hendrix with Chiro MSK Specialists. Welcome back. We are going to be looking deeper at chronic stress today. So last week we kind of talked about the lion in the room and what happens during an acute stress response. This week we're going to look at what happens when the lion stays in the room, at least for a month. So, first we want to welcome you guys back. Pretty amazing. We've actually only got one more week left. So this week's going to be 2 posts. We got a little behind on Thursday and Friday with Easter and patient flow, but we're getting that caught up today. And then this Thursday or Friday, we'll actually post another one of our articles or one of our courses. We're actually going to go back and look a little deeper with like the brain response, and we may actually have another one on nervous system response. So we may actually have 3 more weeks left. I'll have to look at where we're at. We've actually got everything built out now. We changed the order a little bit. That's just the things that we're seeing that we believe in, what makes it flow better. And then you'll also notice that we have got something for y'all in here. So under courses, you're in your chronic pain course on the main site. So when you scroll down, you'll notice these have all been changed, been cleaned up, made it look a lot prettier. The order's changed a little bit, but just stay with me if you've been on this journey. We're going to cover all of this stuff. Just for moving forward, when this becomes a paid type of thing, I wanted the organization and everything to be a little bit more smooth. So we're right here on this one. You'll notice though that we've also added how do you beat chronic pain. And so inside this one, we talk about setting up your SMART goals. Tips for goal settings, what stage you're in before we get into it. What are you thinking right now? Like where are you really at? What we can experience when we have chronic pain and we're really, really frustrated about it, and then we get some new information and what we can go through with that. The type of success rates and kind of where the majority of our patients kind of fall into, how to set your SMART goals with some examples. And then something that's really awesome here is we actually have a pain recovery calendar now. This is where you'll actually have your SMART goals and it'll kind of all be laid out for you. So this was something that we wanted to do moving forward when this moves to a paid site, is to have that calendar and everything there. But we're still going to give you guys access to this for about a month after we finish everything. And in that time frame, I'm just going to be really cleaning things up and making it look real pretty. But you'll notice we basically have it now where you can just look at the days and follow along, and all the sites, all the site links are below as well. And I'll be cleaning this stuff up and making it look prettier as we go. But yeah, so we figured that would be a really good resource for y'all. But we don't want to get too off topic here. So let's go back to this one. Okay, so we're looking at now what happens with chronic stress when the lion never leaves the room. And if you missed last week's, go back, watch that. But basically what we are describing is, if I'm sitting here giving you this lesson and all of a sudden African lion comes in, a hungry one, roaring at you, obviously you're going to have some major responses that goes on inside the body. Now what we're going to look at this week is what happens when that response stays in the room for a long period of time. So you haven't had a time to actually go back to homeostasis or your body's balance. So what causes the stress hormone? And the stress hormone is called cortisol. You'll notice in the beginning, adrenaline played a role in it. So that's why we have that temporarily, when you're in pain or you have like a fight or flight response, your pain actually goes down because your body's trying to get you to move. But then the adrenaline response doesn't last that long. And as soon as that adrenaline is gone, this is when the pain comes up. So any stress of any kind can cause it: depression, illness, surgeries, car wrecks. This is not to be an exhaustive list. So cortisol plays a role in all of these things. So it's really, really interesting. Regulating your body's stress response. So that's why it's called the stress hormone. And this is after adrenaline. So adrenaline and cortisol, they play hand in hand with that one. helping control your body's use of fats. So it's really interesting because they will say like buffalo hump was what we were taught as a board question. So you'll get deposits back on the neck area. And some of my patients will think, like, hey, my neck is out of alignment. And you'll get back there and they think the neck is out of alignment because they have the hump back there, but it's actually from cortisol levels. One of the conditions that does this a lot is Cushing's syndrome. We have called a couple, maybe even 3 Cushing syndromes in patients since being in office. And it can also come from excessive cortisol levels as well. It helps control your body's use of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. It regulates blood sugar, regulates blood pressure, and helps control your sleep-wake cycles and short and long-term memory creation, and then your ability to learn. Because if your memory creation is going, you're not going to be able to retain things. Now, what is the link between you and your pain with cortisol and stress? So cortisol has been linked to fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic Lyme's disease, IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So if you're familiar with these conditions at all, these all have a lot of overplay with each other. Broad body aches, sensitive tissues, headaches. So it's just really quite amazing when you look at the symptom list for these conditions and how similar they are. There's only just little things that differentiate them. Little side note, this is why you'll notice the irritable bowel syndrome and the non-celiac gluten sensitivity. They call it NCGS. This is why we're starting to look at probiotics and gut flora, what they call SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. They have correlated it. Now, our studies aren't in those higher levels yet for us to make a definitive answer on this, and we have some hypothesis. And so remember, a hypothesis just means that we have an explanation to look at something, but we don't necessarily have the science behind it. And that's what evidence-based practices or evidence-informed practices, when we start to get more research behind these hypotheses. Patient could have fibromyalgia-like symptoms, but it actually be from small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And what they are theorizing now is that from the bad bacteria in the guts and the byproducts that it creates, it leaves products that aggravate your nervous system. So it kind of agitates them, causing this broad pain. So it's quite fascinating to pay attention to that. That's why when we have patients that aren't responding well, we always look at, the big 3, omega-3s, vitamin D, I guess is the big 4, multivitamin, and of course, a probiotic type thing. But usually you get pretty solid vitamin D from a multivitamin. It just depends if your body can absorb it or not. Don't want to go down too many rabbit holes on that one. What happens when cortisol has been released for long periods of time? Okay, so appetite changes leading to weight gain, especially in your face and abdomen. We talked about that. Fatty deposits between your shoulder blades. That was the buffalo hump board question that we talked about. Stretch marks, muscle weakness, wasting. It's really interesting because you will get weakening immune system and reproductive issues as well. Now, what does it specifically affect with your chronic pain? Body aches, tissues have increased sensitivity, bowel and bladder disease, decreased blood flow, delays tissue healing. Even though it stops inflammation production, it can leave inflammation in an area due to other mechanisms. So this is where when you get into endocrine hormones, these were nightmare tests, because depending on how well the responses from different hormones, they can play a different role and kind of cause a different thing. So it's really hard when you're not an endocrinologist to kind of understand, well, I thought it stopped inflammation, but it has local, you see what I mean? So it can really play into those things if you don't understand the nervous system really deep into that. The endocrine system. How does a stressor cause physical stress to our bodies? This is what's really, really fascinating. So there was a theory, I think it was in the 1950s when it was published, but it was from Hans Selle, and it was called General Adaptation Syndrome, GAS. And so what he actually found was, in the mice that he was studying, from putting them under chronic stress, they started actually getting physical ailments. And we'll talk about what the physical elements are for you, but let's look at a little bit of like how gas happens in 3 phases. So you have your alarm reaction. So that's your lion comes into the room. Then you have your resistance. So this is where you have that chance to heal and to basically reach that homeostasis. So this is where your body is trying to balance out. Okay, the lion's in the room. Okay, somebody took the lion away, or it's just a lion cub. Or okay, it startled me, and now our body reaches its homeostasis, or basically what we call the balance of the body with the hormones and the fluids and everything in that. And then we have our exhaustion phase. So this is what happens if the lion stays in the room and we get stuck in this like chronic pain or chronic stress cycle. So let's look at these a little more. Alarm reaction. The lion in the room is sent to part of the brain which we call the hypothalamus. So you have to look at the hypothalamus kind of like your thermostat for your AC. The hypothalamus actually plays a huge role in your endocrine system, and it all starts in there. That's your main coordinating body for your nervous system. Releases hormones, and so adrenaline, cortisol. So remember, adrenaline is short term, and then eventually cortisol takes over in the long term stress. This process happens outside of your control, so we call that the autonomic part of your nervous system. And this is your sympathetic, your fight or flight system that we described last week. Okay, and now what happens when we have the resistance phase? Next, the body tries to balance the challenges that happen during the alarm stage. This is what we're talking about. Your body's trying to reach homeostasis or equilibrium balance. This is mainly happening outside of your control as well. So when I say, it's mainly happening, like if your boss is causing you a lot of stress, you can choose to find ways to not let them trigger you. Say your life is causing you a lot of stress, maybe you can start meditating, other stuff. So there is ways to control it, but the initial response part, that is out of our control. That's why we have to recognize these triggers. That's why we use that pain journal in the beginning. Because that lets you know what is triggering you so you can actually develop strategies around it, like a fidget spinner or something like that. And so, the parasympathetic nervous system is also part of the autonomic nervous system. So it's really interesting. Your autonomic nervous system is at the top, and then it breaks into threes. So over here you have your sympathetic and your parasympathetic, and then you also have like an enteric, like a rest and digest. So you notice there's that correlation again with the digestive system again. So the parasympathetic is trying to lower the amount of cortisol produced. It's trying to bring the heart rate and blood pressure back to normal. If the stressful situation comes to an end, the lion is removed, then everything reaches normal. But now what happens when we reach exhaustion? After an extended period of stress, the body has depleted its energy resources by continually trying but failing to recover from the initial alarm reaction. This is where you'll experience everything we listed above. Now, when chronic stress starts to go longer, these are the things that have been linked to heart disease, asthma, Alzheimer's, diabetes, obesity, headaches, depression, GI again, accelerated aging, premature death, and guess what? Chronic pain. Crazy, right? Yeah. So if you're wondering, this is how chronic stress can lead to chronic physical pain. Amazing, right? Okay, guys. Homework-wise, we're going to keep working on meditation and developing those strategies. This may even be a good time to go back and evaluate your pain journal and see which of those stressors that you can actually bring down in your life. Yoga, meditation, fantastic. Guys, thank you for coming on this journey with us. This part we're going to change. Next week, we're actually going to go back a little bit, and we are going to look at the nervous system. So, like how the body gets a signal from your finger and that's been smashed and it goes all the way up to the brain, and the brain decides that it's pain and then sends it down. So we're going to go into that a little bit next week. And then after that one, I think we've only got one more where we're going to actually look at, kind of the research behind what's going on with this. We've already seen some of the functional MRI scans, but we want to go a little deeper into looking at things like how people can have disc bulges and not have pain, or demolition derby drivers have very low rates of, whiplash, and knees, hips, they all have pathology inside of them, but doesn't guarantee pain. And that's really, really important. So that's some of the stuff that we kind of changed our order on. And I may still change it a little bit again, but we'll still have access for that for a little while. So guys, this week we're gonna bring out the paper on the nervous system next. And that'll come out Thursday or Friday. And it's not paper, it's the lesson. All right, guys, thanks for coming on this journey with us. We really appreciate it. Keep practicing this and keep building your cardio, and let us know how you guys are doing. Thank you all. Bye.